We can all agree that the defining feature of the brand new 2020 iPad Pro is its new camera setup that has this new square shape and of course accommodates an ultra-wide sensor and a LiDAR detector as well. And today in this video, I want to see just how different this camera setup is in comparison to the previous gen 2018 iPad Pro that features a single sensor lens setup with a lens nonetheless, but still I am very curious to see just how much more you're getting with your money with the additional hardware here. But before we continue here, I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like on this video, comment if you have any questions, suggestions, or opinions, as the YouTube algorithm likes that, and will help push my content to more people. And if you are a recurring viewer, if you want to help out the channel, please go ahead and click the bell icon and turn on all push notifications. First things first, let's quickly go over the camera hardware on these iPads. On the iPad Pro 2018, we have a singular 12 megapixel sensor with a f1.8 lens and of course a flash to supplement low light shooting, compared to the iPad Pro 2020, which on top of having the very same 12 megapixel sensor and lens and flash, of course, we now have a 10 megapixel ultra wide with an aperture of f2.4 and now a LiDAR detector, which helps this iPad detect depth for like AR and stuff like that. And also there's a difference in the mic setups here. There is a lesser quality one on the iPad Pro 2018 and apparently a brand new studio quality setup on the 2020 iPad Pro. And we'll be comparing those towards the end of this video. And for the people with, self-diagnosed OCD like me, I'm going to move the 2020 iPad Pro over to the right because, left to right is kind of like progress, older, newer, you know what I mean. Next up, I want to mention that the front-facing camera setups are the same. They have the same Face ID tech, the same 7 megapixel sensor. And another thing that's interesting is the fact that you cannot use portrait mode with the back-facing cameras on the 2020 iPad Pro, despite the fact that there is a depth sensor and 2 lenses that could accommodate that. So that's very interesting. So you would think the newer iPad would have back-facing portrait mode, but apparently not for the time being. That might be a software update, or that might be a feature that's never included. Next up, let's compare photos that I took in my living room with the One X camera, and since they are the same cameras, we should notice no difference here. And of course, I will mention that both of these displays are the same, despite the fact that this is technically a generation newer. Apple did not update the displays, so there really is no difference in resolution or color. So that's why I'm referencing these photos here. And like I said, there really is no difference in sharpness or processing or anything. It's exactly the same. But we have to remember that the iPad Pro 2020 has an ultra-wide sensor, so not only can you capture 1x photos like we have here of this camera, you can also capture an ultra-wide shot. And you know what? I've talked about the utility of ultra-wide in the past, and I can see this being useful with the iPad Pro 2020. It's very convenient to just not have to back up all the way to get more in a shot, and I'll demonstrate that here in more of a desk, work-oriented setting. So I have some schoolwork here, representing physical documents that you might be working with at your desk or on a surface, and say you want to take a picture of something to send to your colleague or your friend or classmate. So with the 2018 iPad Pro, you have to bring your iPad all the way up here. It's kind of obnoxious. We snap the picture and then we have things in the frame, right? So that's that. So with the iPad Pro 2020, on the other hand, I think this task will be a lot more intuitive and convenient. So let's press the ultra-wide button here, and there you go. I get the entire document in the frame without having to obnoxiously lift my iPad up all the way here. So here we go. I can snap a picture. Although it's not going to be as sharp as the 1x zoom, you still get everything in the shot without having to exert a ton of effort, and I do like that. Of course, it's not the biggest deal, but that is one of the plus sides of having an ultra-wide sensor or lens. It's not just a fun aspect of a camera module, it does have its own distinct utility. And if you happen to be an iPad photographer, here we have another set of 1x images, and if we swipe over here, we see the ultra-wide image captured by the iPad Pro 2020. And once again, it's just so great to get more into the image with this 125-degree field of view that this lens offers. So if an ultra-wide camera is important to you and you happen to use the camera setup on your iPad a lot, then this might be a reason to buy or to upgrade to the iPad Pro 2020. Next up, I did a 4K video recording test just to see if I could discern any differences, and I really couldn't. The colors, the sharpness, the overall image processing and quality looks the same to me. Of course, the dynamic range as well, and the lack of any optical image stabilization is present as well. So yeah, for all intents and purposes, the 12 megapixel sensors can capture the same quality video on iPad, and I'm honestly impressed. I have said in the past, like, I'm not like an iPad photographer or a videographer, but you can capture some really nice 4K video with these devices for sure. And of course, you can take advantage of the ultra-wide lens and sensor with the iPad Pro 2020 in video, so that is a nice feature to have too. Ultra-wide video can sort of emulate GoPro footage, which which is nice. So again, if you are an iPad Pro videographer and you want that extra convenience or that field of view, then by all means consider the iPad Pro 2020. Next up, let's talk about AR and the LiDAR sensor in the iPad Pro 2020. I thought that, developers would have to, develop the app specifically to take advantage of this hardware, but it seems like it's working out of the box. AR just looks smoother on the iPad Pro 2020. Of course, you can do it with the last gen iPad Pro, but I think the depth sensing technology really does play an awesome role in, making these virtual things in physical space just look more realistic. And I can just tell that, like, for example, this man figure here is just so well tracked to the floor compared to the iPad Pro 2018 or what it did. So yes, the LiDAR detector does make a significant difference in terms of just tracking virtual objects in physical space. And if that's important to you, then once again, I'll reiterate, you might want to consider the newest iPad Pro that Apple has to offer. And finally, let's talk about the microphone quality with both of these devices here. I know it's not quite like a camera feature, but it does play a role in video recording, which is why I included this test in this video. So I recorded 2 voice memos here, one of course with the 2018 iPad and one with the 2020 iPad. So I'll let you listen to those and then I will circle back here and tell you what I think. So here's a quick audio or recording test with the iPad Pro 2018 and the iPad Pro 2020. I'm actually very curious to see just how much better these studio mics are in the new models, so we'll see, I guess, once I put these recordings into Final Cut and take a listen to them. So while the 2018 iPad has excellent recording quality, I can tell that it's just louder out of the box, if you will. The iPad Pro 2020 records a bit softer audio, but if you crank up the gain, if you, turn up the volume in post, it just sounds a lot better, a lot cleaner in my experience. So yeah, if a built-in microphone setup is important to you and you record, musical instruments or voiceovers or whatever you do, then once again, the iPad Pro 2020 might be the right device for you. Of course, you can plug in, an external mic via the USB Type-C port, but having the extra convenience of, having a great built-in mic might be worth it to you in the long run. And that about wraps things up here. I hope this video was helpful if you're choosing between these 2 devices. I'd really appreciate it, once again, if you leave a like on this video, comment if you have any questions, suggestions, or opinions, and subscribe for more content like this. Expect a lot more iPad Pro and, of course, MacBook Air content coming from me as well. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.